Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Twins Daily Offseason Live, the final episode of Offseason Live, because I am excited to say that the offseason has reached its end. Spring training is upon us, with pitchers and catchers officially reporting to spring training in Fort Myers. So for our last episode here tonight, we're going to do a little spring training preview episode to talk about some of the position battles, project maybe the opening day lineup, and maybe talk about some guys who might surprise us in camp. So very excited to finally have baseball back, and we hope you guys will all come celebrate with us. I'm joined here this evening by a couple of Twins Daily writers. We've got a couple of the fellow head honchos, in fact. We've got, you know him maybe as the blog father, the Twins Geek, or that guy with the funny laugh on the K-Fan Morning Show. It's John Bonus. John, how are you doing?
The blog father. That's awesome. I like that one very much.
That's what we all call you.
I went to a place yesterday where the person reserved their seat as Disco Daddy. And everybody was waiting to see. Everybody was waiting to see who would show up to be Disco Daddy. And I thought, I need something like that. And now I've got one. I'm going to go with the blog father. That's exciting.
There you go. There you go. Also, very excited to be joined by the powerhouse from Perham. I don't know. I don't know what the good nickname is, but we got Seth Stowe coming from the deep north of Minnesota. Seth, how are you doing? And what's the temperature up there? Is it getting a little warmer?
Oh, absolutely. I think we were up to like 14 degrees today. It was amazing.
Yeah.
I shorts and flip-flops and a t-shirt outside, and it's beautiful.
Perfection from Perham? Maybe?
Oh, yes, he is. I look at Seth and I think perfection, yes.
Or maybe the ham from Perham. I don't know.
Hamming it up with the old ham from Perham.
Yeah. Prodigy? No, I'm just kidding.
There you go.
Yes, the prodigy from Perham. I like it.
The prospect prodigy from Perham.
So as I mentioned, we're going to do a little spring training preview here. For anyone who's tuned into the show via Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, what have you, you're welcome to comment through whatever platform you're on. We can see your comments come up on our feed here, and we can bring them into the conversation. And we'd love to have you guys share your thoughts and help guide the discussion. I already see Colton says nothing better than Twins Talk with Twins Daily on a Friday night. Thank you so much for joining us, Colton. And David, our friend David, who's been on several episodes, says spring training to Perham in 2022. Yeah, that'd be some good spring training weather. What do you think, Seth?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's 2 parks, a lot of softball fields, and we had 2 water towers, top lights. Yes. Yeah, it'd be great.
There you go. It'll get guys ready to play in the Minnesota April, I guess, right?
You know you're serious when you have 2 water towers. That's approaching big time.
Oh, yeah.
That's a real town. That's a real town. So as I mentioned, spring training just getting underway. Pitchers and catchers reporting yesterday on Thursday. Today is Friday, February 19th, and pitchers and catchers held their first official workouts today. So things are getting rolling, and I know I'm excited to have Seth on the show because, as anyone who follows Twins Daily and him knows, he is a fantastic resource on all things prospects. He knows a lot about all the players that are going to be in camp, all the guys with the numbers in the 70s and 80s, so he can maybe share some good insight on that. And John, actually, I believe, is it tomorrow? You're heading down, John? He's going to be covering live on site.
We will be starting report from the fort on Tuesday. I am arriving. The Twins media this year, if they want to attend, has to arrive in Florida, have 3 days of quarantine, and get a COVID test in that time. Show up with a negative test from Florida in their hand in order to cover the Twins prior to the actual event. And so, I'll be leaving tomorrow, and we will start our reporting from Hammond Stadium on Tuesday.
Fun. Well, I'm really excited for that. I'm glad you get to go down there, get some good weather, and very curious to hear how it's going to go. I know there's been I love that Dustin Morse, the head communications guy with the Twins, has been sharing some behind-the-scenes stuff on Twitter. I think there's going to be a lot of fascinating stories about how they're navigating their first spring training, where they're at least able to plan around some of this stuff a little bit instead of having it spring upon them. And very glad that Twins Daily will be, I think, one of the few outlets on site covering. Not a lot of media going to be down there with everything that's going on. And I know I personally always love the ability to read John's writing and content, which, he works behind the scenes, but he's going to be going down there and producing a ton of stuff. So I think we're all really excited.
I think we agreed. What was it? 6 or 7 articles a day.
Yeah. We'll be holding your feet to the fire, man.
I'll be honest. I'm terrified about writing again. To be honest with you, totally terrified. It'll be interesting to see if I can pull it off. If I can find the old writing muscle. So,
no, so are we.
Usually shake off the rest.
Yeah, seriously, yeah.
We have no idea what to expect here.
So before we get started, just a little overview of some key dates to keep track of here as we count down to opening day. As I mentioned, Thursday, yesterday, the 18th, was the pitchers and catchers reporting date. Now, a few people, I think there's still a few people missing, a few late stragglers with the weather situations that are happening all around the country. I know Tyler Duffy was delayed. I believe he might have gotten in today. But with the stuff going on in Texas, I know that's where Duffy lives. Tough stuff. So people will be probably straggling in a little bit late, but most of the guys are in there. Went through their first workouts today, first pitcher and catcher workouts today, Friday the 19th. On Monday, the 22nd, we'll have the full squad reporting. Again, I'm guessing there will be a few guys coming in late for various reasons, but most of the team should be on hand on Monday, and then full squad workouts getting underway on February 23rd, the following day. The first spring training game will be a week from Sunday, so February 28th. The Twins will be hosting the Boston Red Sox at Hammond Stadium, and then it's about 4 weeks of games leading up to April 1st, Thursday, April 1st, opening day at Milwaukee against the Brewers. So we're going to go over some of the storylines to follow in camp as we get up to that point, and take a look at the roster and maybe some of the unspoken for, unclaimed spots. So here I've pulled up on the screen a look at the roster as it basically exists. I think, compared to a lot of years, it's pretty well solidified at this point. We know who most of the starters are going to be in the lineup. We have a pretty good idea of who's going to be on the bench. The rotation looks essentially set, as you can see there with the addition of Matt Shoemaker in the fifth rotation spot. And then the bullpen, we had an episode. I was joined by John and David Youngs last week to kind of talk about the bullpen picture and get our arms around that and who we think is going to make it, what the hierarchy is going to be. So we feel pretty confident we know most of the spots in the bullpen, who's sort of lined up for those. But you can see those red slots there on the page are kind of the undecided spots going into spring training. And we're going to talk a little bit about each of those roster battles. But before we dive into that, let's talk a little bit about that one new name on the list. One move has been made since we last convened here for Offseason Live, the signing of Matt Shoemaker, right-handed starter, 34 years old, played with the Blue Jays the last couple of years, signed to a 1-year, $2 million deal to hopefully take that fifth spot in the rotation. Seth, any thoughts to share about Shoemaker? Are you feeling good about? You like him as sort of that fifth starter?
Yeah, ultimately, I think he fits kind of that Rich Hill spot from last year, who they got for $2 million last year. Now, Hill was literally going to miss half of the season if it had been a regular season, whereas Shoemaker returned last year. So he can start the season. Maybe that's the difference in the pandemic drop in pay. But, again, it's kind of a low risk because it's only $2 million. And I think there's, I don't want to say a low reward, but I don't want to say a high reward, a pretty medium reward. He literally has been, when healthy, a solid number 3 starter. If he can be that, that's great. Worst case scenario, he gives the team depth. Randy Dobnak can be the 6th starter or long reliever. Lewis Thorpe, Devin Smeltzer, whoever else those other guys will move down a spot, which kind of like you want to extend a lineup. You kind of want to do the same with starting pitching. So, it's not an exciting move, but I don't see a downside to it at this point.
Yeah, with that, fifth spot, having Randy Dobnak there, they had the ability to take, I guess, a little bit of a risk. And Shoemaker is that. He's missed a lot of time with injuries over the last few years. Seems to be healthy now. I think if you were going to critique the signing, it would be that maybe it doesn't have that upside, kind of like you mentioned, the excitement factor where you're kind of shooting high. Even Rich Hill kind of had that to some extent. Shoemaker is really a mid-rotation guy who's going to be maybe a number 3 caliber pitcher at best. And not too dissimilar from Jay Happ in that regard, but I think he's another guy that raises the floor of this rotation. John, what do you think about the Shoemaker signing?
So Wes Johnson was available at spring training and specifically asked him about Shoemaker. He seems pretty optimistic about Shoemaker. The way he views it is he has a fastball that plays and, a splitter that is significant. And you get the sense that he was targeted. And that's always a good sign with this management team. So, I think you're right in that, we want to temper our expectations on what the upside is going to be on this. But I'll be interested to see where he is on opening day. And I'll be interested to see where he is on May 1st or June 1st or whatever. Like, you got the sense that they basically felt like this is a guy that's had to deal with a couple of weird things, specifically things that were not necessarily arm related over the last 2 years, right? And that they see him as having some potential that has been underutilized. I don't think it was. There's a lot of guys available for $2 million right now on the free agent market, and they went and picked this guy. And I think that says something. So let's see what happens.
I agree. I'm intrigued to see if there's any kind of changes in pitch mix or any particular pitch that they're really liking with him. I know with Homer Bailey last year, they really liked that splitter. So going to be curious to see. But I think that, as long as Shoemaker stays healthy and does not look super rough in spring training, he's the prohibitive favorite for that fifth rotation spot.
Mm-hmm.
They're painting it as a battle between him and Dobnak, which, to an extent, I guess it is. But I mean, Seth, would you agree that Dobnak at this point is kind of on the outside looking in? There's just Shoemaker has the guaranteed $2 million, which is a bit of an incentive to keep him on. And also, I mean, you could send Dobnak to the minors and you can't do that with Shoemaker.
Yeah, I mean, I would say he's the prohibitive favorite, but I don't think they need to or really even should say that it's a given at this point. I think there's possibilities, especially because of going from 60 to 162 games this season. That's going to be a big topic all year. I can see scenarios where you could piggyback the two of them. I think it's very important to have a long reliever. So I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing for Dobnak. And also Dobnak starts out well every year. He starts out well. So I wouldn't necessarily put it against him that he couldn't earn that starting job at the beginning of the season. And it could be Shoemaker that's the guy that's on the outside or maybe a long reliever to start the season. Or as it always ends up, something happens during spring training and maybe they'll both be in there and we'll be, unfortunately that means something happened to one of the other four. But yeah, I think you're right. Shoemaker's the favorite, but I wouldn't count Dobnak out by any means.
One thing I want to touch on here before we get into the rest of the convo, because I feel, the rotation, as we mentioned, is kind of set. I don't, there's a lot of things that can happen, but I don't really see that as being a battle to be won necessarily. Shoemaker would kind of have to lose the job, I think. But a couple questions here in the comments, wondering if maybe there would be any further additions to the rotation. Colton asks, is there still a slim chance the Twins bring back Odorizzi, or is the chance of that down to zero now? And Greg adds, I'd like them to sign Odorizzi too, Colton. Lots of upside. They can afford to go higher than $124 million, which, as you can see, is the payroll projection we have on the screen here. That is not exactly accurate as to what the Twins are likely to spend because it does not include the incentives for some players, most notably Maeda, who will probably earn like $8 million in incentives. But still, I mean, you can argue that if the Twins are around 132 to 135 and Jake Odorizzi's price drops, he's I think the only top line kind of starting pitcher that is not signed, since we saw Taijuan Walker just sign with the New York Mets. So, John, do you still think there's any chance the Twins could reunite with Odorizzi, and how low would the price have to drop to make that a reality?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I think there's some chance. What we have seen from this front office is that they like bargains, and they're not afraid to spend extra money on bargains. This would certainly be extra money. We've got it listed as $124 million, but really, I mean, if you are a responsible manager and you're going to spend $130 million, then that's really the budget, right? What Maeda is guaranteed and what Maeda is going to make are totally different things. And so therefore you've got to pull it up to 132 million. If you're going to justify that to ownership, that's fine. That's probably already more than ownership was sort of thinking they would spend this year. Certainly by the beginning of the offseason, that seemed to be the case. I have no problem with ownership spending more, and I don't think they have any problem with spending more if they think they're getting something that's going to significantly improve this team. I think you could maybe argue that Odorizzi might be somebody that can significantly. But actually, you know what? Let me say this. Here's your best path for Odorizzi. Somebody gets hurt, right? We end up going into week. Listen, it happens every year, right? Like somebody in spring training. Maybe not always on the Twins, but on some team, 2 weeks into spring, we hear somebody's elbow's barking. Somebody's not feeling as well as we thought they should be feeling. They've been blessed this year. It looks like they actually talked about this on the press conference today. They almost can't believe they don't have somebody that they're like, oh, well, yeah, I mean, last year was, we think Polanco will be ready by the time the beginning of the season begins, or Buxton will be ready by the time the season begins. Like, we got people coming off injuries. They got nobody like that, at least not on the pitching staff. Everybody's ready to go, right? 2 weeks from now, and I think, frankly, that's what Odorizzi is hoping for, that some team out there is going to have an injury, and they're going to be like, you know what, we need a reliable guy. And therefore we are going to pay Odorizzi. If I was Odorizzi, I'd be thinking about a 1-year deal, and if he can get $11 million, which I think he probably can get from some team that is facing an injury, then great. There's no draft picks involved. He should be able to get that from some competing team that ends up getting an injury. And the Twins aren't going to pay $11 million for Odorizzi unless they are the team that has that injury and they need to start worrying about things. And it'd have to be an injury from one of their top guys. It'd have to be an injury like Barrios or something like that.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of interesting that Odorizzi came into this offseason, intent seemingly on getting paid, which, I mean, why wouldn't you be? He had a tough run, but he's coming off the total lost season. You don't often see. I mean, this is a situation where guys often go for that 1-year make good contract.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. Listen, I understand the frustration. Right. Last year was supposed to be the year he got a multi-year deal, and frankly, he kind of screwed that up. He and his agent kind of screwed that up. Taking the $18 million qualifying offer, given what we saw in last year's free agent market, he probably could have gotten a 3 or 4 year deal that would have been justifiable to turn down an $18 million 1-year offer. I don't think a 4-year, $56 million deal was out of bounds that year, and he would have probably been much happier with that, right?
If he could go back.
They have to make that decision long before the free agent market delivered. All they can do is talk to people. Everybody told them, no, just take the qualifying offer, and they did. They probably regret that. And now they're sitting there trying to make up for lost money, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's no question that they regret it because, I mean, if he would have known, I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, well, we'll get this $18 million in the bank. If he would have known he was going to make like less than half of that or whatever he ended up making, it totally –
at the time, it looked like maybe even it would like, oh, you can absolutely get a 3-year, $39 million deal. That's fine. But why not just take a 1-year 18? And that made perfect sense up until the point where COVID happened and you're suddenly making a third of that on 1 year and you've had a crap year and now you're facing a free agent market that sucks. Like, it was a tough ride. Listen, been nothing but tough luck for Jake Odorizzi for the last 12 months. No question about it. Hopefully something will break well this spring and he'll find himself on a good team with making good money.
Yeah, I mean, you wonder, because I know you and Aaron were just talking about this recently on your podcast about how the Twins sort of talked about the experience of signing Lance Lynn and Logan Morrison to those late deals, those late 1-year deals, and how Thad Levine had kind of said, well, we learned a lesson from that not just signing guys to the 1-year deal, but signing guys to that 1-year deal late where they're sort of, they've run out of patience with the market and they're settling and they're feeling kind of scorned. And that is exactly what would be the situation with Jake Odorizzi. I'm sure if he ended up signing a 1-year, $8 million deal, he's going to be very disappointed and rightfully so. I mean, he should make more money than that. But so you wonder if the Twins would steer away because of that, or if, they have history with Odorizzi. He knows that he can pitch well here. He knows he can work well with the staff. And he'll have that fire under his butt to go out and earn that big contract that he's been aiming for.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I don't think they would have that concern about Odorizzi. Other teams might have that concern about Odorizzi. And I mean, it's possible that in the course of the negotiations or something, they get that impression from Odorizzi and they decide they want to walk away from him because of that. But I mean, ultimately, everybody understands it's a business, and I think he could probably, swallow it. And if it's a, hey, we would love to, especially if it's an injury situation, like, hey, we want you here, we want you to help pull our fat out of the fryer. Somebody is hurt. We're all going to go for something big time. We want you to position yourself so you actually get a postseason start or a postseason appearance. Which, I think, chapped him a little bit at the end of last year. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up. I think the chances of it being with the Twins are unlikely, but I don't think the door is completely shut.
A lot of great comments rolling in here. As I mentioned, everyone who's in the audience, no matter what you're watching through, if you have a commenting function, please feel free to leave a comment. We see them. We can pull them up. We'd love to have your thoughts on the screen and into the discussion. And if you guys have questions or opinions on any of these position battles we're going to be talking about, we'd love to hear them. I see a lot of great questions here from Andrew, including, do you see Travis Blankenhorn making the team out of spring training? And that sort of leads us into the next discussion. We're going to talk about a few of these position battles. And as you can see on the screen there, a few of those open spots, we're going to sort of handicap those races. So I think the big question at a high level, there's only one starting spot in the lineup, I think, that is undecided at this point, and that is left field, which has been vacated by Eddie Rosario. So our first topic of discussion here is going to be who will be the opening day starter in left field. There are a number of different possibilities in that spot, which we kind of pulled up some of them here on the screen. Alex Kiriloff, I think everyone can agree, is the long-term plan to fill that spot. He, of course, was called up to make his major league debut in an elimination game in the playoffs last year. Looked like he was ready for the challenge. He had one of the Twins' 3 hits in that very sad game that got them swept out of the playoffs. And the Twins have a lot of belief in him. He wowed a lot of people over at the alternate site last year. Great numbers in the minors, former first-round draft pick. The question with him, of course, is going to be the service time situation. Jake Cave, another guy who could easily take that spot in left field. He's been a 4th outfielder for this team for a couple years now. Very capable, good defender, guy with some offensive ability. Brent Rooker, who we saw make his debut last year, plays some corner outfield, a right-handed bat. Kyle Garlick, who the Twins picked up off waivers, another right-handed corner outfield bat. And then Luis Arraez, who is now their super utility man, apparently, with Jorge Polanco moving to second. He's taking over sort of the Marwin role, and Luis Arraez does have a good amount of major league experience in left field from his rookie year. So, Seth, let's start with you. If you had to pick right here, right now, and make your prediction at the start of spring training, who do you think is going to be in left field on opening day?
Well, I completely agree with you that I agree that Alex Kiriloff is the long-term answer. But as the rules are right now, it makes no sense for him to be the opening day left fielder. He can be the left fielder in 3 weeks after the season starts. So to me, it's between Jake Cave and Brent Rooker. And since they are going to be probably facing, I think, the Brewers, and their best pitcher is Brendan Woodward, and he's a right-hander, I'm going to go with Jake Cave. I think he deserves it. I think he's been better than most Twins fans probably give him credit for as the 4th outfielder who gets a lot of playing time, and I think he's earned that right. That's not to say there aren't other choices, but I think that's the right choice.
Yeah, I mean, he's earned the opportunity to take that spot, and I don't, it's not they're not committing to Jake Cave as their everyday left fielder by starting him on opening day. But like you mentioned, Brandon Woodruff, a right-hander on the mound for the Brewers on opening day. Cave can rake some right-handed pitching, so not a bad pick. John, who are you predicting will be in left field on opening day?
Well, I'm going to go with Kiriloff. Listen, I think your choice, Nick, is probably going to be Arraez, and I think that's probably the accurate pick. But I think that's the default pick in a lot of ways. But if they have any sort of injury, then Arraez is someplace else. And now you got to figure out what's going on. There's going to be negotiations going on with the CBA during spring training. And a lot of those negotiations are going to be around trying to get expanded playoffs for the 2021 season, right? that the MLB owners want to get that. Right now, the players have rejected every piece about that, right? I could see one of the negotiating points on that, especially in the CBA, which expires at the end of this year, being this whole thing about 6 full years in the majors is BS. How about we do it so that we can actually allow people who, to start at the majors and not play 3 weeks in there, 3 weeks in the minor leagues, to kind of preserve their service time. That ends up, being a negotiating point. And at some point, if that becomes sort of a thought process among major league clubs and or MLBPA piece, they start saying, maybe it's not that important. Maybe this is going to be maybe going forward in the collective bargaining agreement. This isn't such a big thing. So if that's the case, maybe the Twins just decide to do the right thing, which I don't think is going to happen. But whatever, right. Or maybe Eric Kiriloff hits 600 throughout spring training. Everybody gets super excited about him. We've got an injury, and everybody's going, "We're starting who? Why isn't he on the roster?" And at some point, it just becomes ludicrous, right? So I'll go with Alex Kiriloff as a potential Astros starter.
I think you make a couple of good points. Go ahead, Seth.
I was just going to add this before you jump into your guy. If Terry Ryan was still the GM, he would go with Alex Kiriloff. Unless he has just a terrible, terrible thing. He had Bauer on opening day. Oswaldo Arcia was opening day. He had a lot of guys that were top prospects that he just brought up opening day. Now, I don't remember if the rules were different at that time, but
no, they weren't different. And I think you might be right, Seth. He might actually do that. Yeah. I mean, that was Terry Ryan, though. Terry Ryan was a very straight shooter in a lot of ways, and he also loved giving. What drove Terry Ryan in the job of GM was seeing young kids become Major League Baseball players and in the same way that teachers love watching their students develop, or Wes Johnson loves seeing a pitcher break through. That's what drove Terry Ryan. It's one of the reasons why, frankly, he fit so well with the Twins, is he loved prospects. He loved giving those guys. He loved them more than he loved the veterans. He didn't want to get too good of a veteran on the team because it would block some young kids from getting that job. That's my impression of sort of what drove Terry Ryan. And so, I think you might be right. I think you would have I think Kiriloff would be in a better position if Terry Ryan was the GM right now.
Yeah, that's true. I think you bring up some good points, John. Like one thing to think about is I agree. There's no way that when the CBA is restructured next year, whether that requires a strike or whatever happens, that the loophole that we're talking about here, which is that a major league team can take a player like Kiriloff who has no MLB experience and wait essentially, 4 weeks. I don't know exactly what the cutoff is into the season and gain an entire another year of service time. So the team is very incentivized to delay the player's clock. There's not really any downside in doing it, especially with a guy like Kiriloff, who a great prospect, a guy who came up in the playoffs last year and looked ready, someone who the Twins certainly have a lot of belief in, and most people I think feel is major league ready. But it's not like this is, Yohan Moncada or Will Myers, the number one prospect in the majors who's torn AAA to shreds, and it's just like an embarrassment and a shameful thing that you're holding him down. I mean, Kiriloff has not played in AAA, and he's played less than 100 games in AA. And, he spent the last season mostly not playing in competitive games against other teams. So I don't think it's like an indefensible thing for them to send him down to the minors for a few weeks, regardless of the stipulation. But I do think he is their best left fielder. And I think they know that. And, another thing to keep in mind, other than the CBA thing, which, do you plan around that if it's going to most likely go away, is they could, I know this is something that Gleeman has written about at The Athletic, give him an extension in the spring and lock him down on a long-term contract, at which point it becomes sort of moot. There's no reason to suppress him if he's got a contract. And in fact, that might be sort of a motivation for him to sign the contract. A small one, but hey, we have no reason to not let you open in the majors if you got a contract, right?
For sure. Listen, they are. I'm not saying the Twins, but Major League Baseball teams have absolutely used that as a carrot in those negotiations, right? Listen, I mean, we saw it with the White Sox last year, right? Several times, right? That if you want, listen, we don't want to screw around with, we don't want to send you down. You don't have any idea right now if you can hit in the majors, just so we're clear. Like, you know, there is a lot of downside for the player at this point. You know, take advantage of it now and try and sign him to a long-term deal at this point. That's a fairly good point as well. But I don't think that Kiriloff is your pick, Nick Nelson.
No, my pick is Luis Arraez. I can't see any possible way that Arraez is not in their opening day lineup. It just seems absurd to me. I mean, he's got a 330 on base for career average. He's a spark plug. He is a fixture on this team. And I mean, just as an extension to him, I mean, it means a lot to a player to be in the opening day lineup. And I think, I don't know, it's not an insult necessarily to Arraez to not have him in the lineup when you know that he's going to be playing 5 times a week probably. But I think there is a status thing to that, and he's earned the opportunity. And as I mentioned, he came up and played a good amount of left field, and I thought looked shockingly good in left field considering the fact that he has almost zero experience there in the minors, which is something that kind of gives me some confidence that he can handle that utility role because he's just a guy who seems to adapt well, and he has the instincts and ability to hold his own at a lot of different positions.
For what it's worth, Arraez met with the media in spring training for the first time a couple days ago, and he sure sounded like he felt like he was going to be spending a lot of time in left field.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they've definitely given him that indication. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't know if he's picked that up himself or if the Twins have given him that indication, but he talked a lot about playing in left field. I was a little surprised at how much, and it actually had not occurred to me that would be sort of but I think he understands. My guess is the plan is, if everybody stays healthy, for Arraez to spend the first month in left field, and then become more of a utility player once Kiriloff kind of starts tearing things up in St. Paul.
We'd like to hear your thoughts. If you head over to the Twins Daily Twitter account, Seth has posted a poll there. Who will be Twins opening day left fielder? So Seth, keep an eye on that, and if you see those results start to come in, I'd love to hear what the Twitter community is thinking is the answer to this question. Let's move on to our next position battle here. Who gets the last bench spot? Now, we're assuming that there will be 4 bench spots. The caveat to this discussion is that MLB has removed the rule that the pitching staff is capped at 13 on this 26-man roster. So if the Twins decide to carry, say, 14 pitchers, which is very possible, that changes the math on both of these next couple questions. But we're going to assume for now they're going with a 4-man bench and an 8-man bullpen, in which case they've got basically one spot open. You've got Arraez in that utility spot, playing some second, some third, some left, maybe some short. You've got Jake Cave pretty well penned in as that 4th outfielder. And, of course, you've got Ryan Jeffers backing up Mitch Garver at catcher. But who might fill that last spot, which you could really go a lot of different ways because they've sort of got their bases covered with a backup infielder, outfielder, and catcher. So they've got some flexibility here. You've got some different options. Willians Astudillo, the La Tortuga, still in the picture, of course. Brent Rooker is a guy who could very well take that spot and be sort of the right-handed complement to their lefty starters in the corner outfield spots. Kyle Garlick, same goes for him. Another right-handed swinger, can play some first base too. Travis Blankenhorn, a lefty swinger who we saw a little bit last year, a guy who can play some second, some third, good sort of versatile backup infielder. I think he can play a little outfield as well. And Nick Gordon, who's sort of been out of the picture for a while, but a former first-round pick who would potentially be able to give you a backup shortstop, which is kind of nice, play some second, maybe some third. John, let's start with you on this one. Who do you think is getting that last bench spot, assuming that there's one left?
I don't know that you want to start with me because I'm going to reject your premise.
All right, we're going to have – he knows where I'm going, so let's start with Seth then, and then I'll go.
Well, you both know where I'm going because I did tell you beforehand. But you do make a good point because I almost had the same answer for the last 26th man spot and the next one. But I am going to go with Rooker because – and can you go back to the previous screen there, Nick? My thing is this. With Arraez, you've got him. He's got the ability to play left field, 3 infield positions. Obviously, Jeffers can catch. Cave can play all 3 outfield positions. if Brent Rooker is that guy, number one, you get a masher, a guy that can hit the ball out of the park. You can bring in as a pinch hitter. Obviously, all of these guys are going to play a lot, so pinch hitting isn't going to be a big thing, I don't think, for the Twins. But a guy that can play first, left, and right, DH. Obviously, Cruz, you got to assume, is going to get some days off. Now, I also want to throw in the caveat that he is coming off of a broken forearm. When I talked to him last winter, he certainly seemed like he was in a good way to be ready for spring training. But I do think that adding Kyle Garlick is kind of a Rooker insurance, so to speak. So my caveat would be, again, Rooker missed like Kiriloff all of last season, other than those 7 games. So I have no problem if he does go down to the minors for a month and just get some at bats. That's the scenario where I think Garlick would make some more sense. And again, he's another power hitter off the bench as well. So that's my thought.
You've got some agreement on that item. I see Steven says Brent Rooker and Colton says I really like Rooker at this spot. What were you going to say, John?
I was going to say, provided he's healthy, provided the forearm is healed and everything's good, I think there's no way you don't have Rooker on this roster. So if that ends up meaning the 13th spot, if that ends up meaning the 12th spot, I don't know exactly what it means, but you've got to have Rooker on this roster. I think you have to have Rooker on this roster more than you have to have Jake Cave on this roster. And that is, I say that not because, listen, Jake Cave absolutely has more experience. He's valuable. I don't see Jake Cave not being on this roster as well. But you've got to have some right-handed pop on this roster. And if you are going to ever sit, a Kiriloff, if you are ever going to sit a Kepler, it's going to be for a Rooker, right? We've got a lot of left-handed places that he can kind of fill in. And I think that's one of the things that I will be shocked if Rooker is not on this roster one way or the other.
Nick, I'd like to just add one thing there. And I know I've said this before, but I do want to clarify because I think we're starting to get more and more listeners to this. So a lot of people may not. But, we talked about the service time as it relates to Alex Kiriloff. But he's 22. And I think the sky's the limit for Kiriloff. Rooker's already 26, maybe even 27. Even if he is there opening day and is straight through, he doesn't become a free agent until he's 32, 33 years old. So to me, I just wanted to clarify that's the difference in Rooker being on the opening day roster compared to Kiriloff. So that's my little soapbox. Sorry.
Good point.
Very valid. Greg agrees Rooker and Kiriloff would be a great platoon, he says, and he also says he agrees 100% that Rooker is more valuable than Cave. A case to be made for that, but Cave has proven himself as a major league hitter and can play all 3 outfield positions. I just don't know that Rooker is – I don't see him as being so essential on the roster as you, John, because I just don't know that he's going to get many opportunities. I mean, there's not guys in this lineup, left-handed hitters, that you're going to pinch hit for. If you're going to pinch hit for anyone, it's maybe Andrelton Simmons or I don't know who else you really would. But, and he's going to be in St. Paul, so they can call him over in a pinch if they need him at any point. For that little right-handed pop, the guy I'm going for is the man we see on the screen there, Willians Astudillo. I feel like he's a very good fit in that 26th spot on the roster because I think he's a good complement to Arise as a backup infielder in that, Arise, I think, kind of specializes at second base and will probably play a lot of left field early on. Astudillo can play third base, probably a better defender at third base than Arise is. And third base, of course, with Donaldson there is a position where you need some depth. And Astudillo can play some first base. That's another place where I don't really ever expect to see Arise. And he can play a little catcher. I mean, that's obviously that was his position. I know people don't want to see him very often at catcher because he's not good defensively there, but having a third catcher on the roster, now I know Ron Gardenhire, it was his pet. He always had to have a third catcher, and it was a little ridiculous. It was sort of this over paranoia that he was going to lose a catcher in the middle of the game. But there is a truth to the fact that, especially when you got a guy like Mitch Garver, who you might want to start at DH occasionally or first base, it makes you a lot more comfortable having both those guys in the lineup if you know that should something happen to Ryan Jeffers behind the plate, you're not going to lose your DH. You got Willians Astudillo. He can start behind the plate here and there. I just think he's very functional, and he's at a point in his development, unlike Brent Rooker or Travis Blankenhorn or Nick Gordon, some of these other options in that spot where you don't have to worry if he's the last man on the bench and getting a couple at-bats a week only. There's no development left to happen there. To me, that's almost the biggest thing. I mean, these guys are coming. Brent Rooker, Nick Gordon, Blankenhorn, they barely played last year. They need to go get regular reps and see live pitching. So I just think it would be kind of dangerous to put one of those guys in a role where they're just not going to play very often in the majors. So that's kind of where I land on that. John, what's your take on this final bench spot?
Can you go back to the last slide there, Nick?
I certainly can.
So here's the only thing I'd say about this slide. Arise is most likely the left fielder. Right?
Starting left fielder.
The starting left fielder, which leaves a utility spot open, right? I think Cave is going to be in there. I think Jeffers is going to be in there. And you don't have to necessarily replace Arise with an infielder because you've already got people moving around the infield, right? You've got all kinds of options. You can move Arise into the infield. You can move one of those guys out to the outfield. You can do a Cave Rooker platoon out in the outfield, something like that. I mean, this team loves pitching. Last year, every extra spot they put on this roster was a bullpen spot. And this year, even though there's a 26-man roster, you're not limited to 13 pitchers. And so I will not be at all. In fact, I expect we will have a 3-man bench. That 3-man bench will be Jeffers, Cave, and Rooker. And then we will have 14 pitchers on the roster instead of 13. And, if I was going to pick one to put out there, we'll get to some of the last spots in the rotation, but I think we should just talk about Lewis Thorpe a little bit.
Okay.
Lewis Thorpe does have an option. We learned that this week, which is nice that they applied for an option and got it back on him. That said, he's a left-hander. He throws fire. He'd be great in the bullpen. I mean, listen, I think they have not given up on him as a starting rotation person, but I also think they might feel better about keeping a close eye on him on the 26-man roster as opposed to being in AAA in St. Paul. And I will tell you from Wes Johnson's press conference today, he's real excited about Lewis Thorpe. He's excited about his offseason. And I think the quote that he said, I don't have the exact words, but it was something to the effect of, physically he looks great. Mentally, more importantly, he seems to be good mentally where he is, right? I think, and he talked a little bit about how Thorpe had success in 2019 and how that may have hurt him in 2020. Right? We saw it in a shortened spring training for him, a delayed spring training for him, and then one that he was sent down to the minor league fields early. We saw it in last year's decrease in velocity. Now, all the mental changes in the world don't help you if your velocity is down, right? But one gets the sense that they are excited. One got the sense that Wes is excited about seeing Lewis Thorpe in camp this year. And so I will suggest that maybe they make room to see if they can get a fire-throwing left-hander as the 14th spot in their bullpen to carry on and see what they do.
Very creative. John says the last bench spot goes to Lewis Thorpe and is not a bench spot after all, which I guess brings us to the next subject of focus here. Who's going to get the last bullpen spot? Or in this case, if we think they're going to go with a 14-man staff, maybe there's 2 spots left. But for now, I would like to work under the assumption that they're going to go with 8 relievers, in which case you've got 7 of those spots. As I mentioned, I did a show with John and David Youngs of Twins Daily last week where we went over this bullpen and kind of tried to project who was going to be part of it. And the consensus seems to be that those first 7 spots are basically spoken for. Taylor Rogers, Alex Colomé, Tyler Duffy, Hansel Robles, Caleb Thielbar, Jorge Alcala, and Cody Stashak, which would leave them with at least 1 spot at the end of that bullpen. And quite a few options. John talked about Lewis Thorpe, who was a guy that we thought was maybe going to be out of options. And in fact, we had picked him as our favorite for that 8th spot during that show because we were still under that impression at that point. But upon learning that he does have another option, there's no real obligation to have him on the staff. Randy Dobnak, who would be supplanted from that fifth rotation spot if Shoemaker gets it, is a good option. He has functioned in that role in the past. Devin Smeltzer, of course, a guy with plenty of experience. And then moving away from those long reliever types, you have Sean Anderson, who the Twins acquired from San Francisco for Lamont Wade a couple weeks ago. Ian Jabot, who I made this slide yesterday, and now he has been designated for assignment, so he's probably not going to be in the running, although I believe he went through waivers. So he, like Brandon Waddell and Ian Hamilton, three relievers that the Twins were able to get off waivers and take off the 40-man and keep in the organization. I would consider that a big win in terms of the bullpen depth, but probably out of the running. And then Edouard Kalina, maybe a long shot, made his debut late last year, one of their best relief prospects, but probably needs a little more time. So, John, let's start with you. We know that Lewis Thorpe is going to be your 14th guy. Who's your 13th guy?
Well, let's go with Kalina. I mean, I don't know if that's the truth is my 13th guy is probably Lewis Thorpe, but I just put him as my 14th guy, so I'd have trouble doing it as my 13th guy. I like Dobnak. I like Smeltzer. But I don't know. You know what? I think I will go with Smeltzer. I'll go with Smeltzer. Here's why. I think they're going to need a long guy in that last spot. They have been – they're going to have a lot of games in April where they need a fifth starter. And to what extent they end up having faith in Matt Shoemaker or some of the other folk, or J.A. Happ. I mean, frankly, I think April weather, COVID, blah blah blah. I think you're just going to want some sort of long relief guy available. So that brings me to Dobnak, Smeltzer, and Thorpe. And since I've already got Thorpe as 14, I'll go with Smeltzer as the last guy in the bullpen. As somebody, I mean, frankly, he does check all of those boxes, right? He's the kind of guy that you feel you can put Smeltzer in as a opener. You can put him in as a emergency starter. You can put him in as a 3-inning reliever. And whatever you need to put him in as, you can do that and feel fairly comfortable that he's going to kind of pull it together. Keep things close at least one time, maybe a second time through the order. So I'll go with Devin Smeltzer as my last guy in the bullpen.
So is the idea there then, John, that you would send Dobnak over to the alternate site, keep him on a regular starters regimen, and make sure that he's ready to step into the rotation when they're certainly going to need a starter?
Yeah, I do have a fair amount of faith in Randy Dobnak right now. Like I didn't get a chance to ask Wes Johnson today what he thought happened to Dobnak over the second half of last year's season. But I mean, last season was so goofy, right? Like they get 10 starts. His first 6 starts were fire. 3 of his last 4 starts were crap, right? Was that something changed? Did he have a little twinge? Something going on? Was it just random? Oh, yeah, I don't know, right? So I'm not sure Randy Dobnak knows. I don't know what Johnson knows. Maybe they know. I'm going to try and find out while I'm down there at Fort Myers on Tuesday, right? Because I really like Randy Dobnak, right? I think he's an important player because people get hurt. By the time we were into the second week of the season last year, we were 3 deep in the bench rotation spots, right? We were down to Thorpe making starts, right? We had 3 of our starters go down, right? Pineda, Happ is old. Pineda's been occasionally unavailable. We don't know exactly. Shoemaker's been hurt a good chunk of the last 4 years. I think we're going to need Randy Dobnak at some point. So I'm excited about Randy Dobnak, but I like the idea of Smeltzer sitting around in the bullpen because he just seems to be able to do whatever you need him to do.
Yeah, I agree with you that they're going to need Randy Dobnak, and that's why he's my pick for that final reliever in the bullpen, just because There's some uncertainty in the rotation, certainly. I think they're going to want to take it very easy on their starters, with a guy like Pineda or a guy like Shoemaker, who maybe are coming, have had some injury issues in the past. They might want to do some piggyback type stuff. So I just think having a guy like Dobnak, who you trust so much in that long reliever spot, he's available to step in if a starter is unable to go on short notice. I think that no other team in the league probably has a long reliever as good as Randy Dobnak. So it's one of those things that just gives you a nice advantage. And I realize that's like the uninteresting answer, because I think it's, probably anyone would guess if Shoemaker makes the rotation that Dobnak would be the long reliever, just because he was penned in as that fifth starter. But he's just a good fit in that spot. And he's a guy who can come in and throw strikes, get ground balls, and be efficient, bridge the gap to the bullpen if there's a short start. I just really like him in that spot. And Dobnak has earned the chance to be on the opening day roster. He's been a good pitcher for this team for the last 2 years. Seth, who are you going to go with for that last spot, assuming there's only one left to go?
Well, like you said, I mean, you gave the obvious answer, because it's going to be Randy Dobnak. I mean, it's just that simple.
But let's say it's John's scenario. Let's say it's John's scenario, and Dobnak is the 13th starter. Who's your 14th?
Well, because they need to be careful with arms, as you alluded to, and I think they not only need 5 starters, but at least one long reliever. I think they're gonna rummage through pitcher after pitcher after pitcher back and forth from St. Paul to the Twin Cities. So it was hard for me to pick. I can't argue with either. Smeltzer did that job last year, and he did it well. Dobnak was terrific, like you said, 3/4 of the season, and then suddenly he couldn't find control, or hitters learned not to swing at his huge sinker. But he's the guy that you could have come in and get a ground ball double play, things like that. I mean, I'm kind of trying to tell you guys both that you're probably both right. But I'm going to pick another guy, and I'm going to go with Sean Anderson, just because I think he's got really good stuff. He's the guy they got, as you said earlier, from the Giants for Lamont Wade. I guess I'm picking him because he throws pretty hard. He has the slider. You're curious what Wes Johnson will do with him. I think to me, if they do go with 14 pitchers, he's that 14th guy. But I mean, they've accumulated so much pitching, and like I said, I really believe that as much as we saw, Felvey and Levine use that Rochester connection often last year and the year before too. Actually, not last year, but the year before. We're going to see even more of that this year, and that's a good thing. And as you alluded to earlier, having Waddell, Hamilton, and now Jabot, who was outrighted and cleared, stick around is huge. It's huge. And the other thing I'd just like to point out is they brought in a lot of guys on minor league contracts, non-roster guys with big league experience, and quite a bit of big league experience in some cases. Guys that that they could come up and make one spot start, and then you DFA them after the game, and you don't feel bad about it. So I really think they've done a nice job in providing a lot of depth, because I think they're really going to need it.
Seth, I think I don't know how much you sat in. It feels to me like there's a lot of steam around Sean Anderson right now. Wes Johnson seemed to verify a little of that steam this morning. He seems very excited about Sean Anderson he knows him since watching him in college when he was coaching against Sean Anderson. He talked a lot about his stuff and about the slider and everything else. I think I get the sense that Wes Johnson's very excited to have Sean Anderson in camp this year, and in fact, I think he even said something to the effect of like he was a key addition or a sleeper addition to the roster. You got the sense that Wes Johnson felt like the Twins got a little bit of a steal when they approached the Giants and pulled Sean Anderson on the deal. So what I'll tell you is I like the idea of Sean Anderson being on this roster, and I'm not sure it's necessarily going to be in the last spot in the bullpen. Like, I get the sense that he could knock something – if any of those other guys gets hurt, or if Robles doesn't bounce back, or somebody's a little dinged up going on or something, it feels to me like Sean Anderson is is somebody they are excited to plug into this rotation, into this bullpen in the same way. It feels very similar to Wixler last year, right? It feels like there seems to be sort of a similar level of intrigue around this guy. Like they feel like they got somebody that they're going to be able to work with, that other people that he hasn't really had the success everywhere that he should have had. So,
John, that's an interesting point, because you mentioned Whistler last year. Nobody in spring training was talking about Matt Whistler last year. He barely pitched in games. So you kind of wonder, was Wes Johnson on some backfield talking him through that slider, working him through a plan, and then hiding it until the regular season?
And their profiles are so similar, right? Like we've already seen this story once, right? We already saw it. We just saw it with Whistler last year. And frankly, they felt confident about enough that they would let Whistler go because there was some dispute around the contract, and like about a $1.5 million contract or something. Like it felt crazy to me that they let Whistler go, and I still think it was a mistake. But you can pick up another guy like that, and for Lamont Wade, who frankly probably ain't making this roster. I don't think he would have necessarily. He probably would have been on the slide that we talked about that last spot, but I don't think any of us would have picked him. I don't know. I think the Sean Anderson pick is it. I would just say watch Sean Anderson this year. It'll be interesting. Or watch Sean Anderson this spring and watch him early on. I wouldn't be shocked if you're right. He finds his way onto this roster one way or the other.
I would add this real quick, Nick. John, I don't know how many Wes Johnson Zoom calls you've sat in on. He's excited about everything.
About
his sub sandwich that he had.
Honestly, I was going to call that out. It's like I don't know. Maybe he just gets excited about everybody. Like he's an excitable guy. He might very well be. Every name that kind of came up, he's just like, oh yeah. Well, I want that in my coach, right?
That's like saying Ron Gardenhire. That's like saying Ron Gardenhire got excited about his scrappy backup middle infielder.
Right.
So,
I like that. I like Anderson, and it's interesting you bring up Whistler, because one point that I want to make before we move on here is you look at this layout that we've got here of the bullpen. One thing that this front office has shown that they like to do, and I think that they're going to want to do this year, absolutely, even if they have a 14-man pitching staff, is using one of these spots as a rotating door. It's easier than ever now to bring guys in and out from St. Paul, send them back and forth, and get a fresh arm if a guy throws 2 innings. They're just going to want to have fresh arms as much as they can. It's very easy to do. Sean Anderson has options. So I think that's one reason why maybe this discussion of this last bullpen spot on the opening day roster is a bit of a moot point, because that guy's not necessarily going to be permanent. He probably will be coming and going, switching places with players like maybe Ian Jabot and some of these other pitchers that have options. And if I'm not mistaken, Matt Whistler was out of options, which I bet that was a huge reason they moved on from him, because they want pitchers that they can, at least one pitcher that they can use in that role that is not out of options. And certainly, Thorpe having options left is another guy that could be in that mix, just moving in and out. I know it's kind of frustrating for some of these pitchers, but at the same time, better to be moving in and out of the major league roster than sitting in St. Paul all year, right?
Well, yeah, and when you look at that list, I think the top 5 are out of options. I think Thielbar's out of option. Alcala fits that. Stashak has options. I think that's a really important point.
Probably going to be rotating Alcala in and out, maybe Stashak. But, those guys are going to be steady. I don't think they want to screw around too much with those guys. But that is valid.
We hope not.
But I think that is, what we've seen is whoever goes long, right? When they have to bring in a long guy.
Right.
Well, then the next day that poor long guy is crossing the river to St. Paul, right? Which, that's all right. Listen, you did your job. We know you did your job. That's great. Enjoy your time in Lower Town. We'll call you back here in a week and a half. Right.
I do think that's why Andrew asked, should we sign Tyler Clippard in free agency? He is still out there. A few interesting relievers, but I just can't see them signing anyone to a major league deal that they don't have those options with, because they want the flexibility. I really think that they do. So let's move on to.
Seth, do you agree with that?
What's that?
I saw you shaking your head too. You're also anti Tyler Clippard, bringing Tyler Clippard back on a major league contract.
I mean,
let me suggest a 1 year, $2.5 million deal. $2.5 million deal. You bring him back or no?
Probably not. I think they have enough options, and frankly, I mean, you've got a bullpen right now that has Lewis, Thorpe, Devin Smeltzer, Taylor Rogers, and Caleb Theobar, Hansel Robles, and Colome have reverse splits. That's Tyler Clipper's thing. I don't really see what he's adding at this point, other than the veteran stuff. I mean, nothing against what he did last year. It's like Whistler was fantastic. Clippard was great. But there's no reason to bring him back at this point. I
just don't know how much of a functional role he fits at this point. I agree.
Yeah.
I'd bring him back, but listen, I thought he was so valuable, and a couple $1 million, I'll do it. Right. Just hard
to argue that. Going to have to make room on the 40-man roster, though. Going to have to basically give a guaranteed opening day spot. There are things to take into consideration. Last question I want to ask you guys here about the spring training setup. Who do you think is going to be the biggest surprise in camp? It can be a non-roster invite. It can be someone who's coming back from maybe a down year, someone a little off the radar. I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts. Seth, let's start with you.
Well, I'm going to tap into my inner Gardy, and I'm a big fan of utility.
Scrappy middle infielders.
For me, what you asked, biggest surprise is someone that does something and their name suddenly is being talked about toward the end of spring training. The sire of Fort Myers, as Tom Froming puts together. I think I'm going to set this up by just saying the Twins have clearly made a concerted effort to add defense. They've got Donaldson, Simmons. I think they think Polanco on the other side of the diamond is going to make a big difference. I'm not convinced. And if Arise is their left fielder, okay, my whole thing on defense is completely out the window. But so my name is just someone to watch is JT Riddle. He's got a couple of years of big league time. If he can hit it all in spring training, I think he'll have his name in there late into the camp. And he is a defensive whiz. I know that I saw a thing of the top 20 defensive metric by one of the defensive metrics where it showed Andrelton Simmons was number one by a bunch, but they showed the top 20 and JT Riddle was on that list. So again, he can play shortstop if you want to make sure that you have good defense, kind of that A-Ray Adrianza role from previous years. He won't hit as much as Adrianza, which certainly isn't going to excite people, but I just think he's a name that'll sneak in there. Now, I mean, if you wanted to ask me about some prospects that I'm excited about, I probably could go on forever. But just to try to be different, I'm going with JT Riddle.
I'm glad you didn't go with the prospect. It kept that answer within a reasonable time frame. So I like it. John, who's your pick for the biggest surprise in Twins camp that is just getting underway?
I don't know if it'd be the biggest surprise, but if he performs, he will be the biggest surprise. Nick Gordon. I want to see what Nick Gordon can bring to the team this year. For 2 years, I've been wondering whether Nick Gordon was going to stay on the 40-man roster. And honestly, we haven't really seen anything. Listen, he had a decent start to the 2019 season. He didn't show a lot of he was –
the word is anything.
What I was going to say is he showed you the minimum of what he had. Right? He showed you what you expected, which is he can hit for average. He can, defend up the middle. But, he doesn't necessarily have anything that is like, oh, that's what I want him to have. You know what I mean? He didn't develop power. He didn't develop, speed and plate discipline. He is a guy that puts the ball in play. Now that said, Twins like guys that put the ball in play. And he's managed to stay on the 40-man roster now for 2 years, despite the fact that we have seen nothing from him. I will be interested to see. He and Lewis Thorpe are the two guys that I am most interested in seeing in spring training this year because they both had just such crappy 2020s and crappy enough 2020s that I'm surprised they're still on the roster. And so, and in fact, I mean, certainly there's been a roster crunch, right? Like, I mean, granted, you can take off the guys that you added to the roster earlier, Jabot and Hamilton and blah, blah, blah. But I get the sense that they want to see something from, what is he now, 25? Is that what Nick Gordon is, 25, 24, 25?
I think so, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They want to see what a 25-year-old Nick Gordon looks like. And I want to see what a 25-year-old Nick Gordon looks like, because it's about the time you start developing a little bit of power. You start putting and then, maybe the preaching about launch angle and stuff starts to take place, starts to take hold. He just went through something where almost everything he's ever wanted could be taken away from him. You go through that coronavirus thing where he was in the hospital, and you just don't know all the crap you took for granted. When you were 22, 23. At that point, you're like, I don't know how much of that was really going to happen. I don't know what I got left. I'll be interested to see where he came out on the other end on this. And if we come out of spring training going, this is maybe a different guy with a different skill set than we thought, and maybe a different level of analysis of projection on him.
Yeah, it's telling, because I agree. I mean, it seems like he's been on the fringe of the 40-man roster for a couple of years, sort of at risk of being let go whenever they make a move. But they've had to make three 40-man roster removals in the last couple of weeks, and he has survived them all. I think that says something, that the Twins still have some level of belief. They're keeping him over pitchers that they claim that they like. That this new front office has no connection to Nick Gordon. They didn't draft him, and they look at him and they see a very underwhelming body of work and a guy who has not shown that he can be really an asset in any kind of role. But I like the point you made. I mean, he is at an age where sometimes the power does start to develop a little bit. I mean, the example that comes to mind right now, because it's very relevant in mind, is Brian Dozier, who, of course, just announced his retirement yesterday. He had no power at all until he was like 24, 25. And then when he was 27, he hit 42 home runs. So, sometimes it does come late. Nick Gordon is a wiry, skinny guy, but he does have the bloodlines, yeah. And right. If Gordon added a little bit of power to his game, it would fundamentally change who he is as a player, because he just doesn't have the strength to fall back on, because he's not a very patient hitter and he has no power. So it's like, okay, well, this guy can hit some singles.
I'm not saying that he's going to be a 20 home run guy or something like that. I'm just sort of interested to see what happens as his body fills out a little bit, and as he comes through a scary moment of life, where you can't help but take stuff a little bit more seriously than maybe you took it, 3 years earlier. So we'll see.
No, I'm rooting for Nick Gordon this spring. Absolutely. I think that's a good pick because any kind of positivity based on everything up to this point would be a surprise, essentially. My pick is going to be the Twins' first-round draft pick from a year ago, Aaron Sabato. They took a slugger out of college in the first round, and it was just not a normal situation. Usually you draft a guy, sign him, and you get a chance to have him go to some low-level minor league level and show his stuff a little bit when he gets drafted. And Sabato didn't get to do anything, so Twins fans really don't know much at all about the latest first-round draft pick, but he's going to be in camp as a non-roster invite. And we just had a write-up on him on the site. We're going through our top 20 prospects right now. I think we published number 5 today. Yohan Duron, right, Seth? Was that was yours? We had Aaron Sabato ranked number 8 because he is an amazing hitter. He was arguably maybe the second best hitter in the entire draft, behind the number 1 overall pick, according to some. I mean, this guy is a massive slugger, and he's advanced coming out of college. So I just think the biggest surprise is that people just don't really know. They're not familiar with him, and I think he's really going to open some eyes with his power in spring training. He's going to hit some long home runs, probably strike out a lot. I mean, he's had no opportunity to play against pro competition yet, but I'm kind of excited to see him get into camp and see people say, wow, okay, I see why we drafted this guy who has almost zero defensive value because he can just absolutely hit the snot out of the ball. So, Seth, I know you're much more, of course, of an expert on these kind of things than me, and you probably know a little bit more about Sabato, but are you also pretty excited to get a look at him here in the next couple weeks?
Well, I'm sure hoping we get to see some of that. But John, I know I asked Rocco Baldelli today the difference or the distinction between the guys that are non-roster invites to spring training and a guy like Sabato, who's not a non-roster invite. He is a depth camp guy, but at the same time, there's only 75 total. So Rocco Baldelli said, we like them all to be playing together, working out together. We are doing the distance things. So the depth camp guys are over here. But those are the guys that are going to play. He said some might get starts, but a lot of them will be those guys that play the second half of games. The one thing I was going to point out to John too is that you noticed early in the Baldelli press conference today, he was asked what position players were around, and he named some of the big leaguers, but he specifically called out Aaron Sabato being there, which I thought was interesting because there's a lot of good prospects that are going to be there hitter-wise. I mean, Larnach, Lewis, it goes on, but he specifically called out Sabato, which may mean nothing, but I thought it was kind of interesting.
Well, one of the things we saw last year in spring training, I'll be interested to see if we see it this year. They played prospects a lot. And I mean, they played them in the starting lineup, right? Yeah. It was one of those things where you would see, Buxton in center field and blah, blah, blah. You'd see, and then you'd see, 4 of the top 10 prospects, playing in the starting lineup, not coming in inning 4, not coming in inning 6. Yeah, they'd start them out. We saw the first home game of the year, because the first home game of the year was versus the Gophers, and we thought, okay, well that's cute that they started a lot of the prospects versus the Gophers. Well, they kept doing it. I mean, they did for the first 2 weeks, right? It was as if that was either something Rocco wanted to see them, or it was an organizational value that they wanted to see those players playing against, as top level competition as they could see. Now, also most of those players at this time last year were approaching AA or AAA. They were not Sabato, right? But I'll be interested to see, because I mean, we saw Royce Lewis leading off or hitting 3rd. We saw Jeffers hitting 2. We saw Kiriloff hitting 4. We saw that all in February and March before COVID, right? And in fact, if anything, by the time COVID actually hit and spring training was canceled, there were probably a fair amount of position players who were like, I didn't really get to play as much, right? Yeah, I didn't get in the starting lineup as much.
All these kids playing ahead of me,
right. Well, I mean, listen, nobody has any problem with just taking it easy in spring training. That's one of the things that they are trying to emphasize is, let's take it easy in spring training and get ready for the real season. This isn't NFL training camp, right? This isn't Vince Lombardi's we're going to the hell drill or whatever, right? This is spring training baseball. But yeah, I will be interested to see if we see Sabato in some of especially the first 2 weeks lineups. And I'll also be interested in seeing where he's hitting. If he's hitting there in the 4th spot or the 3 spot or the 7th spot or the 9th spot, I don't know. So,
yeah, I would. He'll probably play a lot in those road games, where nobody wants to go to them.
Sure. Yeah. Fair point.
But that's where they have to bring 3 or 4 major leaguers, and he'll probably hit somewhere after those guys because they want to get those major league guys out of the lineup. As a depth camp guy, I feel like that's what he'll be doing. Now, you mentioned, and I talked to Royce Lewis on Twin Spotlight last night a little bit about how his first training camp, he was one of the guys playing late in the game. And last year he was playing a lot, getting starts, hitting home runs, all of that. But as spring went on, of course, then the guys are going to be starters are going to get most of the time. So, yeah, I expect, like you said, the first few weeks you're going to see a lot of Lewis, Larnach, Rooker, Kiriloff, Yeah, maybe Sabato. We might see
Sabato, right? Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether or not he cracks into that. And we did see that, just so we're clear, last year. Yeah, we did see it in the road games for sure, right? Especially as the season goes on, they'll do that. But even the first week or two, we saw it at home a lot. Almost as if they were trying to tell Twins fans, or especially Twins fans in spring training, like, hey, here's the future. Let's give you a little bit of a preview for it. Now we can see the future in St. Paul. We can go across the river anytime we want to and go see those teams. So.
But like you said, John, those guys were at AA and AAA. They were literally watching because they might come up later in the year under normal situations. And a lot of them did. Jeffers obviously was a big role. They believed in Kalina. They gave Alcala a great opportunity. Rooker, all that. But what I was going to say is Rocco made a really interesting point today that he was told by the front office that in a typical spring training, anywhere from 90 to 110 players get time during big league games. And they're going to cut that down this year to 75 players. So they're all going to play. And that is exciting for those guys.
Well, just so we're clear, Sabato's 21. He's not going to be in Elizabethton unless, or he would have been Elizabethton last year, right?
Like, that's my point. He's a fast mover.
Yeah, he might be a AA. He might be in their eyes a AA guy. That might be a little bit of a stretch. He's probably more of a high A Cedar Rapids guy, but I honestly don't know exactly where he'd be slotted next year. I don't know. Who wrote it up? I don't know. Do we have an idea where he's going to end up next year, Seth?
I mean, I didn't write that in there, but I mean, boy, you could have him start anywhere. I would think Cedar Rapids would make some sense as a high A. But yeah, I mean, getting this time in big league camp will matter. So I would think.
Could we see him in Wichita?
Oh, I think at some point during the year.
Yeah, but I mean, could we see him in Wichita day one?
I'd be surprised. I mean, even a guy like Gilberto Celestino, who I'm high on.
I am too. He was almost my pick for this call, by the way, for this choice, right?
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
How dare you?
But to me, he had like 6 games in high A in 2019. Is he going to get some time in Cedar Rapids again, or is because he spent time in St. Paul last year, does he jump to AA? Royce Lewis, I mean, a lot of people think he'll start in St. Paul. He ended 2019 in AA, and then he got all that time in the alternate site last year. I still think he goes back to Wichita to start the year.
Really?
What does that time in between mean? I don't know.
Right.
It's going to be really interesting because you're still age-wise, compared to the competition. There's a difference now, big difference between age and experience because a lot of players like Sabato had got 0 experience last year, even though he's older than probably a lot of the players in Single A. So that's a great and interesting point.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there's one final little exercise I want us to go through before we wrap up here. So what I'm going to have us do is try to project.
Exercise.
Try to.
I didn't want to do the actual exercise. That was not going to happen, right?
Trust me, there's no cardio required.
Right.
Good.
We're gonna try to predict the opening day lineups. So I want us each to take turns here, trying to slot. And this is not what you think should be the opening day lineup. We're going to try to predict the actual opening day lineup as best we can here. So I've listed.
Are we assuming a rise in left field?
Not necessarily. I think we probably should. I think we probably should. Although, yeah.
Yep.
I did put Kiriloff and Cave in here, so we're going to go around the horn and pick these slots. So, Seth, we'll start with you. Who's your leadoff hitter on opening day? As we mentioned, Twins going against the Brewers, and most likely Brandon Woodruff, a right-handed pitcher.
So again, just to clarify, we're talking about who will be or should be.
Yes, will be. Who do you think will be batting leadoff?
If it's will be, I will say Max Kepler will lead off.
Okay, you think that Rocco's going to stick with his comfort zone and go with Kepler, who was most often his leadoff man last year. Now it sounds like maybe your should be would be a little different. Who's your should be?
Well, I mean, if he's going to be in the starting lineup, I'd put Arise leading off. I mean,
I think I'd probably
old school, new school. He looks like a leadoff hitter.
All right, John, we got Max Kepler in the leadoff spot. Who's hitting second for the Twins on opening day?
Well, that's all right. Okay. So, you got it. Okay.
I gave Seth a good one.
I mean, well, that's a
the best
one.
spot.
I actually love Arise in the leadoff spot. I will be interested to see if they start grooming Kepler to get out of the leadoff spot. But
I wonder that.
It'll be maybe that'll be a story during spring training. A storyline.
If we have any Twins Daily writers that'll be in spring training.
If only that was
someone might be able to cover that.
I mean, someone that's got to write 6 or 7 articles a day. That might just have to be one of them.
Well, let's go with Donaldson as 2. I mean, Donaldson likes to hit 2, and I think they want to. I think they kind of want to keep him happy on that, but also I feel like they recognize the value of having him there, especially if you're going to have a left-hander leading off. So,
yeah, that sounds about right. In the so-called damage spot, that was where they liked Donaldson last year. So, thus far, we're thinking that Rocco's going to stick with basically the approach that he had last year.
Plus, I got to say, I like kind of screwing Seth for the 4th spot.
I know, it's going to be awful.
He's setting him up for the pivot point here where he's really going to be stuck.
That's true.
Unless
in the 3rd spot, of course,
here.
I'm going with the obvious option, Nelson Cruz, the number 3 hitter. It's hard to imagine anything else. What else needs to be said? He's their best hitter, so he's in the number 3 spot. He's been in that spot most consistently over the last couple of years. So now we get to the cleanup spot. Seth, what are you anticipating there?
Okay, first of all, I think once we get this lineup, we need to do this again with what we would do. So this is tough. I am going to oh man, what do I do? Do I need to split it up? I'm not. I'm just going to say, you know what?
Let's be clear. This is where it all kinds of breaks down, right? It almost feels to me like you've almost got to start with the 4 spot and start trying to figure stuff around that, because
work backwards, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the 3rd and the 4th spot, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th spots are the most important point of a lineup, right? So maybe you set those up first, and then figure out 1 and 5 and 6. You know what I mean? Around that, because like I said, we're kind of screwing Seth here. There's not a great option here at number 4, and I think once you get to this point, I think when Rocco gets to this point, if he starts going down this thing, which he probably did, I'm sure he has plenty of times, he goes,
"This is where you change.
I got to make some changes." Right?
Yeah, that's.
I mean, you start to notice now we've kind of exhausted our 3 cleanup hitters in the 1, 2, 3 spots. I mean, those are the prototype cleanup hitters, right?
Yeah. And that's why I think you're right, John. I think as Rocco Baldelli would do this, he would get to this point. And this is where, and I'm doing this myself. I'm saying, okay, this is where I make that change in the leadoff spot. So part of me feels like we should do a lineup on the right there, just to okay, now here's what we really think. But just to keep this going, I'm gonna go the old school way, and Miguel Sano's making the big money. Let's throw him in there, and let's throw Donaldson, Cruz, and Sano, and just mash.
That's a fearsome lineup of 3 right-handed bats there. Donaldson, Cruz, Sano. Yeah, I mean, he's the only remotely prototypical cleanup hitter left in this mix. It is 3 straight righties, which is a thing to think about, but I don't know that Cruz and Donaldson are too susceptible against right-handed pitchers. But yeah, this is the moment where we really start to notice the absence of Rosario, right? Because I mean, that was Eddie's spot, and now it's like we got to fill this in. I mean, especially because he's the lefty, so that would have given us the lineup balance and everything. So this is a moment where when you're constructing the lineup, the loss of Eddie really fundamentally changes the picture here. So we got Kepler, Donaldson, Cruz, Sano.
I love hearing Nick tout the value of Eddie Rosario.
I mean, hey, he was a good cleanup hitter. I'll give him that much.
But seriously, like you said, that 25 to 35 home run power in that 4 or 5 spot is again,
he was what he was.
Changed my leadoff,
especially when you're sitting Kiriloff down at St. Paul because of contract considerations.
Right.
Right.
I will say, I mean, I think we all kind of agree that Kiriloff's probably not going to be on the opening day roster, but I wouldn't mind him in that cleanup spot, honestly, if he was there. I mean, he'd be a good a contact hitter and a very capable hitter following Donaldson and Cruz.
I just remember
you would have no problem with that.
Yeah.
I would just because I remember Buxton hitting third. You know, like I'm not doing that to it, and there's no way, the Twins do that to a rookie. No chance. That's something Baldelli does. That's never something Baldelli's going to do.
Kiriloff had what, sixth in his first? I mean, they didn't put him at the bottom of the lineup when he came up last year.
Sixth is an entirely different thing than third and fourth.
Brent Rooker hit fourth in two of his first 3 games.
Yeah, I don't think Rock would be afraid of it, honestly.
I don't either.
John, you're up next. Who's hitting fifth in your lineup here? Are you bringing a lefty into the mix here?
I'm totally screwed here, guy. Yeah, what should be happening is Kepler should be hitting fourth, and Sano should be hitting fifth, and Luis Rice should be leading off.
Can we do that to the right of this just to be like? Here's what we do after
we can give it one more spin.
Is doing this. What we are doing, like we're really trying to project the Twins opening day lineup. The problem is that we started with Kepler with the assumption that Kepler's hitting first, and that's not going to happen. Like he can't do it
strategically.
Yeah. Things get crazy.
Everybody listening to this right now is jotting this down and crossing.
Well, we're figuring it out on the fly here. Okay, it's tough.
Jesus. I mean,
he's not eligible.
Here's who I want in this lineup in the top 5. I want Luis Ariz, but having him been fifth is ridiculous. So I guess
I don't know. I mean,
Baldelli batted him fourth during his rookie year.
Well, just so we're clear, I would actually prefer to have Ariz batting fourth and Sano batting fifth than what we've got right now, right? Because at least then I've got somebody kind of in the middle there putting the ball in play, and now I can have somebody with power behind him. So at this point, but I mean, given this lineup, I'm going with Polanco, I guess, next.
Okay. I mean, a nice little switch hitter. A guy who hasn't had much power over the last couple of years, but was a former All-Star and certainly a quality bat. I mean, Polanco has hit nowhere other than first, second, and third in this lineup, I think, almost exclusively over the last 2 years. So obviously Rocco holds him in high regard. We'll see how much that changed after a bit of a disappointing season last year.
I got to say, I feel like Nick, as the host, has abused his power here. Like,
you put the lineup in order?
To the ninth, like – third's a gimme, ninth's a gimme. You know, you just like. And now
I always try to go last. I'm being nice.
Like, is anybody not thinking Mitch Garver for 6 here?
Yeah, it's obviously going to be Garver.
Or are you going with Buxton?
I'd go with Buxton.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go Garver number 6 here. So now we circle back to you here, Seth.
Oh, I'll go Buxton.
Okay, all right. So you like Buxton, and that's a kind of a nice little.
Here, Seth?
Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Go Ariz, sorry.
Okay.
Keep forgetting, there's so many names there.
So we're going to say he's in left field for us here in this picture. And then John, I assume Buxton will have Simmons, who is without question the weakest hitter in the lineup, although not an embarrassingly bad hitter.
Yeah, no,
in that number 9 spot.
So here's what I'm taking away from this: 6, 7, 8, 9 are givens, right?
Well, unless Ariz is on.
Well, no, you're right.
I could see Ariz being in the top of the lineup.
That's a good point. No, that's a good point.
And I'd flip-flop Garver and Buxton, I think, but. Again,
what would you flip-flop? You take a look at this. What would you flip-flop? I would flip. I'd throw Ariz in 1. I'd throw Kepler in 4. Sano down to 5. And then switch Polanco and Garver down one more shot, too.
Okay. So this is what you're liking right here. Something like this. Is that right? I kind of like that. I think that's pretty plausible.
I don't mind that. Again, I would have Buxton ahead of Garver just because Buxton hits on first and Garver hits a double. Buxton scores from first. If Garver's on first and Buxton hits a triple, Garver's still on third. And Garver's nothing against Garver, but I want Buxton just to be able to run. So I would flip-flop Buxton and Garver. but
it'll be interesting because I think Arise is such a good fit in that leadoff spot, but yet he is the only man in this picture without a defined position.
Right.
So it's going to be really interesting to see, I guess.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens after April, right? Like Kiriloff comes up. Here's the thing. When I take a look at this lineup, I think I want more left-handers. Right? I wish I had more left-handers in here.
That's the thing that Rosario.
If I bring Kiriloff in, I'm losing a Rise. Right. Yeah. Right.
Let me ask this: does Ryan Jeffers over Mitch Garver alter your lineup in any way? I would argue no, but
I don't think so. I might move him down a little. But
I'd put Jeffers at 8. I'd put Buxton at 7. But I might put Buxton over Garver anyway, like you said. So
I still think Garver is a better hitter than Buxton. I'm not over-indexing on last year, but it is close. And I kind of like Buxton at the bottom of the lineup, getting on base ahead of the top of the lineup. So that's kind of one of the reasons I like him down there. Get on first. Simmons can bunt you over or do a hit and run, and then you got Rise, the best contact hitter. You got Donaldson's power. You got Cruz. So there is that. But nothing wrong with hitting behind Polanco as well. So a lot of interesting opportunities.
I think if Kiriloff comes up, I go back to what we were talking about earlier. Kiriloff comes up and he's hitting. I think he slots in between Donaldson and Cruz. That would not surprise me at all.
And Cruz goes down to cleanup?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. The two things I'll be interested in watching in spring training in terms of lineup goes, and I mean, it's hard to say because with a Rise being a utility player and somebody who frankly should just be leading off every day as a utility player, like I've got to find a place for him. That means that every lineup is impromptu. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
He's knocking somebody out of this lineup,
right?
And I don't know who.
Knowing this Twins front office, knowing Rocco Baldelli a little bit, or thinking we know them, I bet he's got a different lineup in his head and probably on paper or in his computer somewhere for every possible scenario. That would not surprise me at all.
But I'll say this: I'll be very interested to see if I was a little surprised they stuck with Kepler at leadoff last year. I'll be shocked if they stick with Kepler at leadoff this year. When Arise is in the lineup, to be sticking with Kepler and leadoff this year.
I think we agree.
Taking Rosario out. Kepler's your power.
And we will see that in spring training. Like we will hear rumors of, day 2 or day 3, we will hear something about Baldelli has been talking to Kepler about not being in the leadoff spot anymore, right? And then the second thing I'll be wondering is, I wonder we'll start hearing about. We've been talking about Nelson Cruz about batting cleanup instead of number 3. Yeah. To kind of switch things up.
I like it. So a lot of interesting things to think about, and it's going to be really curious to watch Baldelli's lineups throughout the spring here. I do want to, before we sign off, just cover 2 more quick questions that I thought were interesting from the chat here. Nodak Twins fan, a.k.a. Cody, our friend Cody Christie, asks, who pitches more big league innings this year, Duron or Belazovic, the Twins' top 2 pitching prospects? Seth, I'm going to have you field that one. What do you think?
Yeah, I would definitely say Duron. I think that in 2019 he made about 8 more starts, and Belazovic just made 1 playoff start for AA. Duran got the whole time in St. Paul last year. He's on the 40-man roster. Belazovic is now on the 40-man roster, but I just, again, assuming no injuries and things like that, I think Duran is about a couple notches ahead in the pecking order of then Belazovic. And again, he's just got such intriguing pitch mix that it'd be hard not to call him up.
Yeah. Seth did a write-up, as I mentioned, on Yohan Duran on Twins Daily today as part of our Top Prospects series, so make sure to check that out. He was our number 5. Belazovic was our number 6. And Matt Cantorino, who I did a write-up on last week, is number 9. Those guys are all pretty close to Major League ready, and they're all really good pitching prospects. So as you think about this rotation picture, keep that in mind. They got some prospects that are probably going to be ready to join the fray this year. We'll see if Duron comes in as a starter or reliever, but that guy got the potential to really dominate. A big 6'5" guy who throws 100 miles an hour. He's got this nasty splinker. Is it a split sinker? Is that?
Yeah. Just one other surprise possibility is a guy at depth camp named Josh Winder. And I only say that because we heard reports of him hitting 97 last year at Instructs. He pitched at Cedar Rapids in 2019. He's out of Virginia Military Academy, so he's probably 22, 23. But it's interesting to me that he was added to the depth chart or depth camp ahead of Cole Sands and ahead of Blaine Enlow. So to me, that's noteworthy, and I definitely think that tells you what this organization feels about Josh Winder. And it's exciting because Derek Falvey's big thing with Cleveland was drafting college pitchers and making them into something. And you look at Cantorino, you look at Winder, you look at Bailey Ober. We're going to start seeing that more and more this year.
Hey, one thing that was brought up at the Wes Johnson's press conference today was how close those three particular were to Belazovic or to Dobnik, Smeltzer, and Thorpe. And, we just talked about how optimistic Wes Johnson is. He didn't sound particularly optimistic about them. Not necessarily long term, but sort of like his point was they all need to learn to throw strikes. Right? Like in particular, Duron and Belazovic's point was their fastballs they can throw for strikes, but they need to throw the other pitches for strikes. Whereas, Dobnik and Smeltzer and Thorpe have learned to pitch to throw some of the other pitches for strikes as well. So, I'm not saying be less optimistic about them. I'm just saying that it felt like they have, in Wes Johnson's view, they had some room to develop before they were getting to the level where we were like, oh, why aren't we talking about these guys as fill-ins on, the first half of 2021?
Yeah.
Seth, final question for you. Which non-roster invite has the best chance to make the team this year, courtesy of Andrew?
Would it be bad if I didn't go with JT Riddle as my choice since he was my –
That's fine, yeah.
Honestly,
he can be exciting and not make the roster.
Boy, how cool would it be for Andrew Albers to make the roster? What a story that is.
A terrible pick. Yeah.
I'm not saying that would be a great thing, but man, what a story. What a guy.
It'd be fun.
Another name to watch has to be Keon Broxton, especially with
he's come up a lot in the comments, so I'm glad you brought him up. Yeah. A lot of people talking about Keon Broxton.
I mean, he had a 2020 season in the big leagues, 3-4 years ago. I know he's 30 now, but he's still got the speed. He's still got the defense. So again, on that theme that the front office clearly has expressed interest in defense, having a guy like that to plug in if Buxton did miss some time is pretty important. It'll be interesting to see if he's really a candidate for a 4th or 5th outfielder spot too. At some point, I know he's got an opt-out, so I would imagine that decision will have to be made early.
Yeah, we didn't bring him up as one of the candidates for the 13th or 14th guys, but 13th guys. But he's absolutely a candidate that we should be talking about probably. Yeah,
a nice, versatile, speedy defender who can play all three positions, right-handed bat, got some power. Yeah. John, final question for you before we go is what is going to be your top thing you're looking for here? You're heading down to spring training tomorrow. What's your focus? What are you planning to write about? What are you most interested in exploring and learning about as you head down there?
Oh. I mean, I guess I'm looking to see – I guess what I will be interested to see is how this team reacts to normalcy. You know what I mean? Like and I think everybody is struggling with trying to evaluate what happened last year, right? I've asked both Baldelli and others, what they are taking a look. Everybody is trying to reflect on sort of an early playoff exit, right? Against a team that they were absolutely favored against, and then they got swept out of the playoffs. And I wonder how much of it they are viewing as, well, that was just 2021. or that was just 2020, and how much of it they are looking at is like, no, there was something wrong, and we need to figure out what the right recipe is. And what I've heard so far is, as they've certainly reflected on what went wrong, but they don't know what the right recipe is, right? They have, Baldelli said today, it wasn't our starting pitching that let us down. It was our hitting, and it was our defense, and maybe it was our bullpen a little bit. But, every year the recipe changes, right? Every year what lets you down changes. And I don't know that they know. Frankly, I don't know that they can know, because I don't think we know either, right?
Mm.
What has gone wrong? What went wrong 2 years ago? What went wrong last year? What has gone wrong every year since 2004? Right? And I'll be interested to see if anybody feels like they know what that is. The two people I've asked about it are Baldelli and Cruz. Those are the two leaders, right? Those are the two leaders of the team right now. And both of them kind of went, we know we got to be better. But what is the value that you embrace to be better? What is the strategy you do to be better? What is, do we have to be healthier? Do we have to be more aggressive? Do we what do we have to set higher expectations? Do we have to be more consistent? We don't know that stuff, but I'm not sure they know that stuff either. I think they're probably grasping the same way we are. And I'll be interested to see what answers they gather around on that, and whether or not they think they know that in spring training, or whether or not they think they figured that out in August.
Love it. Love it. Well, I think we are all very excited to see what you learned down there. Very excited to follow your coverage. As I mentioned, John will be heading down to Fort Myers tomorrow. He'll be starting to report next week, and spring training is underway. Full squad reports on Monday. Spring training games start in about a week, actually about 9 days. And baseball is back, folks. So we're all really excited. We thank you so much for joining us here for this show. I think this was our longest and final offseason live. And I think the next time you hear from us on this channel, it'll maybe be spring training live. I don't know, John, are you planning to do some video content from down there?
Oh, for sure. We got to do some Fort Myers live. You're right. Absolutely right. Yep.
Cool. Love it. Love it. All right. Well, I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in. Thank you for all the comments. Thanks for everyone who has followed along with Offseason Live. It's meant a lot to us to be able to come on here and chat and talk baseball with each other and all of you in the absence of being able to do the winter meltdown and stuff like that. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining and participating. Thank you, John. Thank you, Seth. Everyone have a great Friday night and enjoy spring training. Come by Twins Daily. We're going to be covering it. John will be covering it from down there. We'll be covering it from up here. And we hope you guys will come share your thoughts in the comments, do some blogging. It's going to be a fun season and a fun spring training. So thanks, Seth. Thank you, John. Everyone have a great Friday night and a great weekend. Go Twins.
Go Twins.